Hey, welcome to David's Rebel Podcast. So, in this show, we're going to look at encapsulation. So, let's start though with a little bit of entertainment. Probably the most famous callback in JavaScript is the timer interval. So, if we set an interval, what you notice is that the function of this function takes a function, and it's a custom function that we can do whatever we want inside this interval. So every 700 milliseconds, I want to, for example, call the create function. And then if I save that, take a look, every 700 milliseconds, it's going to recreate a bunch of lines on the screen and explode them outwards. And so that's how you can kind of create a visual effect in this example. But what we're doing here is we're doing data grids. So this is an application programming interface that basically does a query on a table, and you can sort the records, skip and take however many records you want. And you can also apply a filter aware clause to limit the data that comes back from your application programming interface. And so what we're doing here is we're using just plain old vanilla JavaScript to render, but we're designing it in a smart way. We're building controls. We're using template literals. We're binding that JSON data into the controls. Now, in your ivory tower, what you learn at school is that you learn that you should use object-oriented programming. You should write reusable code. You should make generic functions. You should build libraries. You should architect code in a smart and intelligent way. But what often happens in the business world is, your employer will sit down and say, "Hey, David, I want this functionality. I need this page. Can you do this page for me?" And if you've been well trained, you'd be like, data grid. I studied those data formats. I studied how to do it on YouTube. I've studied what the people at Node are doing, and I understand application programming interface. So like a good student, you sit down and you go, he needs a data grid control or something like that. So you go and you spend a bunch of time, or from your boss's perspective, you waste a bunch of time making a control that's going to make your life easier for getting the requirement that he wants. And then you sit down and you go, okay, now I got to give him what he wants. And so you're like, I come up with this awesome control. Look, last name, first name, phone, pets. It looks beautiful. Look at the screen there. But then what happens is your boss sits down, and for some reason he clicks on this one. And when you see with the page load, he's like, what the hell is that? That's not what I want. I don't know what this is. This doesn't mean anything. This doesn't work. This is obviously broken. And so you're like, but I made the perfect control. It's just I can't use it for this particular requirement. And it's often tempting. What a lot of people do is a lot of guys will go in and just change the control. They'll go, what my boss wants is he wants drop-down list for the vet, so you can pick the vet or pet, or just display the name of the pet or something. So they're like, oh man, let's go in there and let's just fix that. So we'll go in and where to go? Let's see. Here's the code. Okay, so but we've done things differently. What we did is we designed it with a callback, anticipating that this could happen in advance. So here's our normal control. Normally you would have that data grid just render itself, which is what you see is happening on the screen right now. But we can just as easily insert the callback to this function, and then we can customize to what our boss needs. So for example, get to the end of the line here. now we're going to pass the function in, and we're going to get the value, and now we can customize the value on how it appears in the grid. So for example, if the header is equal to ID, for example, let's put some stars around it. So we might go myval equals star plus myval plus, let's wrap it in stars, return it. So I'm just showing you how you can go ahead and customize. But of course this will customize it for all the grid, and that's not totally what we want. Let's see if this is, oh, I have to write function. So here I write function, and then I specify the function, and then when I close it, I gotta close my other function. So it's a double function. And then it'll render now. So what's happening is if I go to a table that's showing the ID, here, what I did is, remember in the beginning we made our control to have options because we also anticipated ahead of time that we might need to change the database names of the fields and maybe the order. So then what I did is I implemented a save functionality so you can save a configuration JSON, and then what that allows us to do is configure it so you can show and hide things. So if I save this, for example, it'll show in the order. So there's those asterisks where we specified if the ID existed, we overriding the value and then applying the asterisk to it. So and then the other thing is this from the previous video, we can reorder the elements or change the name for this particular table. This is a custom fit, custom ID, and then if we save that, you'll see that it elevated the ID to the top, and then we changed the name that's displayed on the screen. So these customizable aspects, one way is that you use a bunch of option parameters. The problem with that is you end up then doing a lot of customization within the control itself, because then it's tempting again to like say if an option equals this and you're on this page, then make it work this way, but if it's not, then make it work this other way, and then it's not really a reusable component. You're just kind of hacking at that point, and you end up with this gobbledygook of presentation layer mixed up with business logic, and then it's just like not really that usable. And so you really do want to try, if you can, to keep your controls generic and no business logic in that place. So you have to think smarter sometimes to achieve what you want. And so here's some strategies that can help. I know we've broken the rule a little bit because I did pass those options in, but these to the data grid, it's kind of generic. Being able to customize the field names and stuff and separate it from the data. In hindsight, I probably would have changed the data maybe before I pass it in, then we don't need all those options. We just go straight to the data grid, so it's a lot simpler. But hindsight's 2020. So let me go ahead and hide the custom field there, that ID custom, and then it disappears from down here. You can hide this. We'll go back. Now we'll go see what the appointments. So what we want to do is, why it's taking so long to load is that I decided to go through all the tables and detect each of the columns in the table if I can find a match to an pre-existing table name. Like, for example, pet_ID can make a match to the table called pets. If you take the ID part out, add an S, then the name pet will match a table that we have called pets. And that's a good clue that this particular field is going to be referencing another table. And in that case, we want to go to the lookup table. So what's happening is when the page first loads, I'm going through it and finding all the cases where a lookup field is used, and I'm pre-looking up the data. So I go do a fetch for each of those. So I'm doing a fetch for the vets, a fetch for the pets, and a fetch for the contacts, because you don't want to be looping through each record and doing a fetch on every row, or it's going to take a really long time to load this grid. And since they're all referencing the same table, what you can do is prefetch and then do a local sort. So it's going to perform a lot better that way. And then you get the same result, you get your grid. So let's go ahead and implement that particular code. So what I might do then is generate a drop-down list for each of these three. So I'll go into the code here, and I'm going to just replace this function with the function that does just that. So what it's going to do is going to try to do that match lookup we just described, cutting out the underscore ID, looking it up, adding the S, does it exist? And then here is where you can pollute your solution with business logic. Here you're in your business logic domain, so you can actually say, if I'm dealing with the appointments table, then I want to display generate a dropdown for this particular field. And the user can then select the dropdown that they want, and it'll display on the screen. And then if it's an ID, I'm going to wrap it in stars. So let's see what happens if I try that. Let's make sure I'm closing it correctly. So what I want to do actually is I want to go like that. And then, oops, almost worked. Oh, I know. I forgot to return the myval. So let's add that. Okay, so now the appointments table is a little more complicated, but now we've got the names being displayed in a drop-down. So you could go and look at the other dogs in that table or filter that so it's only displaying. So you can basically do whatever you want. You can customize it, now meet your requirements. You can adapt, you can change, and you haven't polluted your control. It's still a pure control that handles just a generic data grid, but you've used that callback to bubble up and allow you to customize your own entries for every column, and then you can write in that business logic. So that's how you make a reusable control in software development. And you still have all that functionality that the generic control gave you of being able to skip and take and filter and sort the grid. I can still sort it in descending or ascending order. I can still edit my records. And again, I want to apply the same sort of logic to my form, so it's not, to memorize all these codes and SKUs and IDs. You can just switch these to drop down. So I would apply the same methodology that I did here with my form, and you'll have to wait for the next video if you want to see that. And another thing you might want to be looking forward to is being able to apply the search bar, how we could implement search bar in our application. All right, so I hope that's been informative, and we'll see you in the next video.